recently we've seen people move towards blue sky, abandoning X, for example. Do you see a trend or at least a split in the future between user-controlled, sort of for better, for positive outcomes kind of platforms versus profit-driven and very centralized platforms like X, like Meta?
There will be a shift, and we're seeing the community respond and say we're not happy with this response. Twitter made a similar move, or X made a similar move, sacking the fact checkers, moving towards this community notes. The platform changed dramatically, and a lot of people have left the platform. I think you will see that happen. Although the focus of a lot of the reporting has been on Zuckerberg's statement that he is going to be doing away with fact-checking, he's made 6 other announcements at the same time, including that they will be winding back the filters that are applied on Facebook. So at the moment, there are filters that filter out abhorrent content, harmful content, and that it will at the same time also be making changes to the policies around controversial issues, things like immigration or gender politics. So it's not just that they're removing the fact checkers, it's at the same time as they're doing that, they're going to wind back the filters and they're going to liberalise the policies. And that combination is really quite concerning. I think it will lead to people seeing a very different experience on both Facebook and Instagram. Although I guess it is important to note that at the moment, Facebook or Meta is saying that these changes will be rolled out in the US first. So we won't see an immediate change in Australia. I think, though, the big question for me, particularly within the Australian context, is we've really seen a shift in the Australian community to say, we want social media platforms to be regulated, and we don't want, as individual users, to have to continue to carry the burden of reporting, of it being our obligation. We want to shift that obligation onto the companies. Now, Parliament has responded to that by seeking to legislate and regulate in this space. The question is, how are we going to do that effectively? And then, of course, how do we enforce those regulations and laws on a company that isn't headquartered in Australia? And that's sort of the battle that Julia Mann-Grant, our e-safety commissioner, had with Elon Musk in the aftermath of the Bondi attacks. So, there's a lot to come in this space.
So you think we are actually a bit different to what people want in the US, in that we want the social media platforms to be more responsible, that we care more about the truth?
I think globally there is increasingly demand for social media companies to be held accountable. I think that also applies in the US, regardless of this move, which I've seen people describe as Zuckerberg kissing the ring of the new king, which I think is an apt description. I'm not sure it's actually reflective of the US population's views. The thing we have to respect, though, is that both governments and the social media platforms have a big impact. The decisions that the platforms make, the decisions that governments make, have a big impact on our daily lives, on our daily experiences. We hold government accountable via elections. We don't really have this mechanism to hold these big platforms to account. And Changlei, that was actually the subject of the last time we met and we were talking about this.
Exactly.
I think that we're increasingly seeing demand for legislative mechanisms to hold these companies accountable in ways that don't quash innovation as well. So it's not just about regulating, but it's about saying there has to be accountability. Now, that accountability is unlikely to come from the US with Trump's election. We've seen the EU make some steps, particularly with its Digital Services Act. But I think there's also real scope for Australia to move forward, to learn from what has happened in the US, to learn from what has happened in the EU. And countries will be looking at what Australia does, because we are a economy, we have a population of a size that many other countries that aren't as big as the US, that aren't as big as China, that aren't as big as the EU, but have concerns about the way that these platforms are impacting on our daily lives, on our social interactions, and questioning their social license to operate. So I think there really is.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanna.
Australia.
We can lead the way. Yes,
Indeed.
like in gun control. Professor Joanna Weaver, Founding Director of the Tech Policy Design Centre.